Well, hello, welcome to Blue Ridge Community Church. My name is Jeremy. I'm one of the teachers, pastors, and elders here at Blue Ridge Community Church. Why don't we do this? I'm sure there are some of you sitting with people you don't know and you've awkwardly been worshiping with them and you guys have kind of looked at each other. Would you guys just turn to the people at your table, whether you've said hi to them or not already, and just say, hey, it's good to see ya. Awesome. Thank you for entertaining me with that. Okay, that's awesome. One of the things to start practicing, guys, is even during the music, go ahead and you're sitting at tables together. Just do that. Be the one that's shouting over the music saying, hey, I don't know you. My name's Jeremy. And there you go. So we give you permission to shout over one another and during that time. So, hey, I want to start off this morning talking to primarily those that are followers of Jesus here, those that see themselves as disciples of his. Now, I know that there are people here that don't, people listening online, people at our Bedford campus who don't identify themselves as followers of Jesus. And I just want to quickly say to you, I'm genuinely excited that you're here or you're listening, you're a part of this because when someone, no matter the reason why you may be here, whether you're forced or not, when someone who knows they're not a follower of Jesus shows up to an environment like this, it means that God's up to something in your life. And I cannot wait for you to see fully what it is that God wants to do and how he wants to reveal himself to you in this season. So super excited that you're here. But talking primarily to those of us who would identify ourselves as followers of Jesus, I want to ask you to kind of finish this statement. Would you finish this statement? In your mind, just kind of think about this. I am grateful God has what? I am grateful God has, it could be anything, any memory, any thought. You can look at your family, you can look at how you grew up, you can look at where you're at now in life, you can look at how you came. I am grateful God has. What comes to mind? For me, all sorts of things, they come to mind when I think about this statement. I think about how grateful I am, how God's invited me, not just to be a part of people's lives, impacting people here in Lynchburg and at Blue Ridge, but just all over the place. A handful of years ago, Dave Kuntz, another teaching pastor here, and I, we were over in Pokhara, Nepal, a town in the country of Nepal, and we were on top of this Tibetan orphanage. It's a orphanage that we've supported as a church for years over there, and we were training and teaching around 50 of the older kids at this orphanage, and we stood on the roof of this orphanage and we were looking out over this panoramic view of the majestic Himalayan snow-topped mountains. And it was moving on towards evening as we were standing up there, and so you could begin to see the flicker of the light from the homes in the foothills. And Dave said something to the effect in that moment. I can't remember his exact words, but it's something like, and can you believe the day and age in which we live? That we get to be here? That in basically 24 hours, we could fly, we could be on the other side of the world doing this. And that may sound small and insignificant to you, but in that setting, I was struck with this gratitude that God, I can't believe you've invited me, Jeremy, to be a part of a moment like this. How would you fill in that statement? What comes to your mind? I'm grateful God has radically transformed my family. You guys know I've shared with you guys my story in the past, and I look at my kids, and when I think of my kids right now in our home, and I think about God's love for me and God's love for our family and how he radically transformed my family of origin from extreme dysfunction, brought us out of that. And I think of my kids getting to grow up in a home with two parents and grandparents who love and authentically want to serve Jesus. I don't know a time in our family history in generations where that has been the reality. I'm so grateful that God has radically transformed my family of origin. What do you think of when you think of the statement, I am grateful God has? What's happened in your life? You go, I'm grateful God has done this. I'm grateful God has connected me through his spirit inside of me with other people in intimate, significant relationships. I mean, there's all sorts of relationships I think about. I think about this summer, and I'm a part of this experimental disciple makers lab we've been having on Tuesday nights. And my group a couple Tuesdays ago, we got done praying, doing a prayer walk in our local area, and we were having a meal together, breaking our fast together. And at our meal there at a local restaurant, we were able to just kind of share our stories with one another, share their stories of, what our families were like growing up. We got to share stories of how we came to Christ, things hard and good things that we've walked through in our lives. If we were married, how we met our spouses, how we came to Lynchburg, how we came to Blue Ridge, and all these types of things. And I just left there filled with gratitude that once again, here are new relationships. Most of these people I didn't know before this summer. And here are new relationships that I get to be a part of because of Jesus in us. And I'm watching as these people are genuinely excited to make disciples who make disciples, even if it means being placed in uncomfortable situations. And I left there just full of gratitude. I think about my Wednesday night launch group that's met for the last year and a half. It's met more sporadically in this last year because God has definitely moved us to different spaces. You see, for basically the previous year of basically all of 2021, we've been praying, gathering on every Wednesday night, praying that God would launch us out to make an impact on the world around us. And God moved one couple away from Blue Ridge to Alta Vista, where they're from, moved another couple, felt God was moving them to New York City. And so at the beginning of the year, they moved to New York City. Now, it hasn't been easy. In fact, they've been struggling. They would tell you it's been actually relationally super difficult. They've questioned a lot. Man, are we doing the right things? All of this. But last Wednesday, as we got together in Zoom and we got to just pray, I got to pray with them and for them. There was this genuine compassion and tenderness that isn't Jeremy Wilkinson, because I'm naturally not a compassionate and tender person. I'm not. But for them and what they're walking through and wanting to support them, I'm grateful for that inside of me that I know is not of me. Or I think about my Thursday life group that I've been a part of for basically the better part of the last 4 years. And just a couple Thursdays ago, we were over at one of the guys who's a part of the group. His parents just recently moved to town, and they're not followers of Jesus. They're very clear on that. In fact, they're very opposed to Christianity or any type of like organized religion. And we're over there just helping them unpack. And as we're going down, as I'm moving boxes that day, up and down stairs, helping them unpack, watching this dynamic that's taking place in this home, watching these people I built relationships with over the last few years, watching them serve, how we're serving together in this very practical, tangible way, my heart was, again, just filled with gratitude that I get to serve alongside and with people in this way. How would you finish that statement? I'm grateful God has. Take a moment. Seriously, take a moment and think, I'm grateful God has what? You don't nod at your table. I know you're like, should we do it? Are we supposed to do this? No, just in yourself right now. You're grateful God has what? Based on whatever's come into your mind, what do you think our response is supposed to be? Like, what do you think our response is supposed to be based on whatever's coming to your mind? I mean, maybe for some of us, we think like, this is why I love corporate musical worship, because it allows me to look at all the things in my life that God has done, and it allows me to express my gratitude towards him and what he's meant to me. Maybe you think of, it's not about singing, but it is about you vocalizing it, and it's about saying thanks. It's about gratitude, that you just love engaging with God. And when you meditate on these things, that's what you think. It's this kind of vertical response towards him, of what he's done for you. Maybe because of your religious past that you grew up in, you kind of feel a little guilty when you take a moment and think about all that God's done for you. And you go to more of like the behavior type of things, like, man, based on everything God's done for me, I mean, I need to be praying more. I need to be reading the Bible more. I need to be showing up to church services more, whatever it may be. But I would venture to say, whatever you think our response to be, most of us, we think of a vertical response, right? That's naturally where we go. And it makes sense, and they're good things. God has done this for me, therefore I need to respond to him. But what we've seen in this series, One Another's, is this actually gets flipped on its side, moving from a vertical response to a horizontal response. In fact, today we're gonna see that more and more as we look at this passage in Philippians 2 where Paul is talking to the church at Philippi. And it's in this section the NIV commentators have titled it, Imitating the Humility of Christ. And what we're gonna see again is Paul flipped this response from the vertical to the horizontal. In fact, look with me at what I mean. It says, therefore, if you and me, have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if we look and go, yeah, I can't believe God's allowed me to be a part of this. If any comfort from his love, you go, I cannot believe he loved me like this. If any common sharing in the Spirit, if there's this unity and this connection with other people because of Jesus' Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, there are these things that God has transformed and changed in you. He says, then make my joy complete. So he's got something that he's inviting the church at Philippi to do. He says, make my joy complete by being like-minded, and you could just fill in the blanks here with one another, because that's who he's talking to. He's talking to the church. Having the same love that Christ had for us, for one another, being one in spirit and of mind with one another. Like Paul takes this, like we've seen all throughout this series, he takes it from this vertical response, which isn't bad, which we're supposed to do also, but flips it on its side to this horizontal response towards one another. And we see the power and the impact of when we begin to respond to each other, even just within the church. We begin to respond to one another the way Jesus responded to us. We see the very beginning in this series is built off of John 13. As I have loved you, I want you to love one another. By this, the way you love one another, everyone's gonna know you're my disciple. So when we do this well, when we live these out, when we take these vertical responses and flip them on their side into this horizontal response towards one another, the world takes notice and they all of a sudden go, oh, we know who they belong to. They're disciples of Jesus. He even went on with the unity talk a couple weeks ago to say, hey, they're gonna know who I am, the Messiah, Jesus is who he claims to be, and they're gonna know my love for them when we do this well. And so we've called this the Summer of the One Another's, where we're looking at these one another's, these 59-ish, and we've grouped them into basically 5 categories. And we're looking at these 59-ish one another's that help us practically unpack what loving each other well looks like in the church. And so today, we're gonna look at this through the lens of humility. Looking at the lenses for Philippians 2, what it looks like to love each other well through the expression of humility. So, before we jump in, would you pray with me? Jesus, I am grateful. I really am. I could just list off a bunch of stuff, just grateful for who you are, grateful for what you've done in me, grateful for the part that I've been able to be in this church through the last 23 years, grateful for, as I look out in the crowd, I see it almost every single table. I can go back to an experience, a connection, a life journey that we went on together of some kind. At almost every single table, there's one person, I just think about all that you have done inside of this community of faith that has impacted my life personally. And I am so grateful for that. And I want and desire, and we want and desire as many people as possible to experience that. And so would you show us through the perspective of humility directed towards one another, how different we could look than the rest of the world around us, and that they would look at us and go, how can you respond in this way? It just doesn't make sense. And we would be able to point them towards who you are and what you've done in us. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. So if you got a Bible, you can open up to Philippians chapter 2. That's where we're gonna be. And I just wanna reread the section we just went through. We're gonna go through the first 4 verses here, and we're gonna talk about it for a bit. It says, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete, Paul says, by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one of mind. He continues, do nothing, he says, out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. So I often hear of followers of Jesus, disciples of us, we often talk about wanting to go deeper. Like we wanna go deeper, which I think is a good desire. But let me give you my thought that I believe is a biblical picture of what deeper really means, especially in our context here. I believe deeper has less to do with information and significantly more to do with application to our lives. I think we have a lot of information from all the resources that we have at our disposal in this day and age within the church. All the different talks, all the different resources, all different books, we've got plenty of information. And I believe that a biblical picture of deeper for us comes back to this application. James, the brother of Jesus, he said as much in James chapter 2. He says, don't just be hearers of the word, listeners of the word, and deceive yourselves. We can deceive ourselves, even in listening and hearing it. But be doers of the word. Jesus in Luke 16 said, you're faithful with the small, guess what? I'll give you more and more significant things. The prophet Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 15, he talks about this whole idea. He says, obedience is actually better than sacrifice. The most sacrificial thing you can think of, he's saying, God would rather you be obedient in these things over here than try to live the most sacrificial thing you can do over here. See, I think we all can understand, we all know in our minds, like when I mentioned humility, for example, we know that we're supposed to be humble. Like that's surprise, surprise. That is not something we have to struggle to get to. And it can feel like a very simple concept, right? But it's in the application of humility is where the struggle is, right? It's in making humility lived out between one another relationally, even within the church, where all of a sudden it gets real, it gets deep. And when we do this, when we do choose to love each other through deeply applying humility towards one another, we experience intimacy and deepness with Jesus and intimacy and deepness with one another. So what I wanna do as we look through Philippians 2 is I wanna build a working definition. I'm not saying this is a definition if you go to Webster's you're gonna find for humility. This is a working definition of humility that Paul gives us in Philippians 2. And this working definition, I want it to be in something that I can take and I can apply it to my relationship with you, and you can apply it in your relationship with me in very practical and tangible ways. And so we look here at this. You can go back to the previous slide. There you go. It says this, look with me. It starts with this negative example. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Now, I looked up all the Greek and the Hebrew. This is actually a legal term that you find in Aristotle's writing. It has to do with gain in political office by means that are less than above board. You see, human nature has not changed in 2,000 years. Okay, that's where these terms come from. But this week that I looked at this and I was thinking about this and I was moving through it, and then God showed me how far I still have yet to go when it comes to humility. Wednesdays I set aside as that day where I can devote the whole day. I have other days where I have partial days, but I can devote the whole day to kind of writing and preparing for talks that I've got coming up. And so that's my day. And so Kelly, my admin, she knows not to schedule anything on that day until maybe in the evenings, because that's the day I've set aside for that. Well, I woke up that morning, and a couple of hours into my morning, I realized that my cell phone wasn't working right. And there were people that were letting me know, hey, you're missing something here. You're not responding to things that you need to respond to. And so I was doing some problem solving, and I looked and I noticed that the bars on my cell phone, it showed no connection in there. And so I'm like, great, what's going on? Experiment a little bit more, did restarts, did all those things, couldn't get it fixed. I'm like, great, I need to go by the Verizon store now today. Awesome, interruption of my day. But I really need to get this taken care of because I can't go the whole day without being able to respond to people. And so I thought, you know what? I looked at the hours that the Verizon store wasn't open, but the bank was, and that previous Friday I'd lost my wife's debit card. Yay me. And so I thought, you know what? I'll go by the bank real fast. I'll get that debit card replaced. And then by then the cell phone store will be open. And then I can go on doing what I actually have set aside for the day. And so I get there to the bank branch. And I can tell you, like over the last, 10 years, I've gone into a physical branch of a bank like 5 times maybe. You know, I had no idea, when I got in there, I know where the tellers are and I see the odds, but I didn't know where I'm supposed to go to like replace my debit card, what I'm supposed to, tellers can do that for me, so I'm supposed to go to these people. But I went in there to this branch and there was probably about 10 to a dozen employees in this very small branch. And they were, different ones were engaging with different customers in different ways, but I stood there and nobody acknowledged me. And I stood there. And I stood there. And I even listened, and this shows you the condition of my heart. This one guy was talking to another teller about the baptisms that were happening at his church, and I'm just like, will you get on with the baptisms at your, like legitimately, I have things to do right now, kind of idea, like legitimate. So the people are working, and some are with customers, but I'm like, can nobody here like just even acknowledge that I'm here right now? Okay, so I'm breathing heavy, and literally after about being there for 10 minutes without a single person acknowledging me, finally one of the customer service people, they step out from behind the teller line, and she's on her way to help someone who's in her cubicle, but I'm not gonna let her escape me. And so she like kind of is trying to move past me. She says hi, so I step in her way. I step in her way and I say, hey, I need my debit card replaced. Can you just direct me as where I'm supposed to go? And she goes, yeah, you can just sit right over there and we'll be with you in a moment. And then very snarkily, as she's continuing, I say, it would be nice if someone would have acknowledged me when I stepped in here. And I let her go. Humility. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. I had places to go. I had things I needed to do. My day was already going incorrectly. I had things that I had scheduled that were there. Do they know who I am? I've been a customer here for how many years? Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. He starts with a negative example. I did go over and later apologize to her, just so you know. I did. I remembered. I was supposed to be preparing a talk on humility today. He starts with a negative example, but then he continues. He says, rather in humility, value others above yourself. And this is where we get the first part of our working definition of humility. It says, our working definition of humility is valuing others above ourselves. Just imagine a group of people that regularly just did that in real, tangible ways. He doesn't stop there. Look with me back at verse 4, and then we're gonna stop for a moment. Not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. The second part of our working part of definition here of humility is looking to the interests of others, valuing others above ourselves and looking to the interests of others, the people at your table above you, the people in this room above your own interests. If I'd had space, I would have said, looking to the interests of others first, above our own. What does this look like? Well, I was really encouraged the other day. I was talking to a group of people, and I was talking with some of our summer interns here, and they were 2 of them that are actually the music and arts side of things. They were sharing how they weren't, when we first announced tables at the beginning of the year, they weren't all that excited about it. And especially the table interaction weeks, they weren't excited to be a part of that. And so it was a table interaction week, and they're sharing the story, and their plan was this, that after they served here on stage, what they would do is there's what we call the green room in back. It's a room that's set up for people who serve, all day on a Sunday, and then go back there on the stage, and then go back there, and there's some little snacks for them and things like that. But it's a place where they can just kind of sit and be in between services, where they can talk, gather, pray together, do those types of things. But it's a room that they have access to on a Sunday morning. And so their plan was, you know what? I don't want to sit at tables with other people. I don't want to do this interaction thing. So after we get done, we're just going to go sit in the green room. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. So the day came, and rather than do that, what they ended up doing was like, okay, we'll go and sit at a table. But the story doesn't end there. As they sat at a table, they sat with this couple that had just moved 2 days earlier from Canada. And as they listened to their story, they realized that this couple had no connection with anybody else here at Blue Ridge. They were brand new. They had Googled and found on Reddit a review for Blue Ridge, and they showed up. And that was the table that they were at. And so inside of them, then they felt this other kind of prompting. These people, they're not connected relationally. We can do that. Not looking to our own interests, but the interests of others. Valuing others above ourselves. And so that afternoon, they did the simple act of going out to lunch with this couple. Humility, valuing others above ourselves, looking to the interests of others first. What if this is just what we practiced on a Sunday morning? We're supposed to practice this in all the environments with one another, all this. It's not just meant to be a Sunday morning thing, but especially given the season that we're in this summer. What if those of us that were a part of Blue Ridge, that we're relationally connected? What if we looked around on a Sunday where everyone is uncomfortable because they come in here and everybody's getting their courage up to go sit at a table and pick their place? What if we were the type of church that we said, you know what, I'm gonna look for people that I don't know rather than the people I do know, that I'm most comfortable with? Why? Because I know in this room there are new people. Because I know in this room there are relationally disconnected people. I know in this room that there are struggling people. I know in this room that there are people that were where I was just a short time ago. I know there are people in this room who are giving Jesus one last shot. And Jesus has faithfully brought them here. What if, in this very practical, tangible way, we set aside our own comfort and we started having those eyes looking around the room saying, who don't I know? Who can I connect with in a way? And maybe, just maybe, God will begin to do something. And we'll stand back and go, wow, look what you've done as we humble ourselves and love one another well. Paul doesn't stop there. He actually raises the ante. He says, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset. So here's his example as Christ Jesus. Now I hear pushback often like, well, yeah, that's Jesus. He was perfect, right? It's not my example, it's Paul's example. It says, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. You see, the third part of this working definition requires us to take on the role of a servant. Taking on the role of a servant towards one another. Jesus had all the same authority, power, and rights, Paul just said, as God the Father. God the Son had all the same things. And yet what did he do? He lowered himself. He didn't hold on to those advantages. He didn't say, I'm a pretty big deal. He lowered himself. In humility, he lowered himself, taking on the image of human likeness, becoming the servant. I love coming in, genuinely, on a Sunday morning. And guys, you guys know, if you've been here at Blue Ridge, we are nowhere near the size we were pre the pandemic. And so right now, practically speaking, we have plenty of parking spaces in the paved spaces to let everyone park there. But what I love is pulling into the graveled lot out there. And I just love that as a church that's stuck. I love that the people that are parking out there are the people that actually get here the earliest. And many of them stay the latest. And what does the rest of the world do when we get there the earliest? Well, what do we do when we're at the mall? We take the front spot, right? That's normal. That's what we drive around we drive around for far longer than what it would take for us to walk, the 50 yards that many of us need, I'm including me, in this to walk that. And we look for the closest up spot that we can get. But I love the fact that in a culture we say, you know what? In humility, I'm gonna choose to serve in practical ways by parking the farthest so that the people that will come in later on today, they can get up front. They can show up and have that premium space. What other ways? What other ways, if we just begin to think about it, God, I'm so grateful, and therefore I will take on the role of the servant. What other ways? These practical things that we can do is say, God, I'll do this. I'll play the role of the servant. Paul continues, he says this, and being found in the appearance as a man, he, Jesus, humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. This is a huge one. What did Jesus do here? Our fourth part of our working definition is he laid down his rights. We laid down our rights. Think about the conversations that are happening around our world and our nation over the last several years. It's my what? Right. It's my right to have this in my home. It's my right to do with my body what I want to do with my body. It's my right to treat my sexuality the way I want to treat it. It's my right, and fill in the blank. Jesus says, and he modeled, and he showed us, Jesus, he didn't sin. He didn't deserve death. He wasn't guilty of anything, and yet he humbled himself and laid down all of his rights. And he became obedient, Paul said, to death, a criminal's death on the cross. Why? Because he knew that you and I would remain dead in our sin, would remain dead, separated from him and his Father for all of eternity, unless he was willing to lay down those rights and become obedient to an unfair, unjust death on the cross. What rights are we holding on to as the church? What things what hills am I saying, no, it's my right, rather than, no, it's my right because of what Jesus did for me. It's my privilege because of what Jesus did for me to lay that down for the person sitting across from me, for that person I just met today, for that person that I came here with, for those people I serve alongside, for those people that I'm frustrated with, that are other Blue Ridgers, other followers of Jesus, other disciples. I humble myself and I lay down my rights. Humility, it's something easy. We know it. But we want to experience depth relationally with Jesus and with one another. How can we begin to do these things? How can I value others above myself? Look to the interests of others. Take on the role of a servant. Lay down my rights. So here's what I want to do, or what I want to challenge you guys to this week. Next week, we're gonna come back, we're gonna be at tables. For some of you, when you step in, it's gonna be having new eyes as you step into here. Others of you, it's gonna be just showing up because you don't wanna be here when we're interacting at tables together. And there's something that God possibly has for you. But above all those other things, we're gonna interact with this more. We're gonna get real practical with this. We're gonna talk through that. That's what those table interaction weeks are. But here's what I want to build into us throughout the rest of this week. Here's my big takeaway for us. Would you, at the beginning of your day and at the end of your day, would you start your day with saying one thing? In fact, maybe it's in the notes app of your phone. Right now, you just write the word gratitude at the top of one of the notes things. And just this week, you're just gonna Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Just won't take any time for you to just look at and fill out that statement from the beginning. God, I'm grateful you have, and fill in the blank. Whatever it is you think of that comes to your mind that morning, write it down. And then that evening, look back on your day and go, God, I'm grateful that you, whatever it is, big, small, doesn't need to be huge, just you're gonna do that. Because it's out of that humility will flow. That will move from this vertical response to him to this horizontal response towards one another. Would you stand with me? We're gonna worship. I had planned on waiting till the end of the service. Would you guys actually bring up that slide, that last slide? Would you guys, we did this at New London last week. Can we just read this together before we worship musically? It says this, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Would you worship with us?